Hey friends, welcome to End Time Talks. I'm Joel Richardson. Together, Dalton Thomas and I are tag teaming, each doing 5 to 15 minute segments on the issue of the end times, current events, the interrelationship between those two things, and what the Bible has to say about these matters. Now, if you're looking for more than just bite-sized segments, then do be sure to download the Frontier Alliance International app. This is an app that is chock full of excellent, relevant content. Everything from music to music videos to full-length feature films to studies through different books of the Bible. We've got an end-time study on Daniel and Revelation, articles, all kinds of relevant updates and information. Okay, it is available for free on every major app platform. So download the app, Frontier Alliance International. You will absolutely be very happy that you did. So God bless and Maranatha. Is Russia Gog of Ezekiel 38 and 39's oracle concerning Gog of Magog? Is Russia the nation or the entity that the prophet Ezekiel was pointing to that would lead a massive invasion of Israel in the last days? The answer is no. Now, how do we know that? Okay, when we look at Ezekiel 38 and 39, we have a listing of nations that would be led by this end-time evil dictator referred to as Gog. It says that he's from the land of Magog. He's the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. He rules over the area of Gomer and Beth Togarmah, and he's partnered with Persia, Cush, and Put. Okay? Now, how do we understand what these names mean? What did they mean to Ezekiel and his immediate audience? How are we to understand them today? Well, there are two primary methods of interpreting these different names. Okay, the first one is what I refer to as the historical wild goose chase method. So let's take, for example, Magog. Now, in the writings of the historian Josephus says that the Magogians became the Scythians. Okay, so the Magogians, they migrated out of the region of modern-day Asia Minor or Turkey. They went through Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, Ukraine. Eventually, they made their way up to Russia. They spread out all the way across the Russian steppes. They intermarried with some of these Scandinavian sort of Vikings that came down, the Rusian peoples. And from these peoples, we have the Russians. So if you trace the Magogian peoples, their migration, their intermarrying history, down through history, you end up with Russia. Okay, so this is where people would say that Gog is from Magog. If you do the sort of DNA tracing, Magog becomes Russia. And that's by following the historical DNA bloodline wild goose chase method. Okay? The other method of interpretation is what I call the geographic correlation method. And this is simply the historical grammatical method, which is to say, how did Ezekiel and his immediate audience at the time the prophecy was given understand these names? Well, at the time of the prophecy, Magog was simply Turkey. Meshech, Tubal were simply Turkey. Persia was modern-day Persia, Iran. Okay, Cush and Put. We're talking Sudan and Libya, North Africa, etc. We just simply look at the areas where they were located when the prophecy was given, and then we correlate them to modern-day nations, people groups, tribes, etc. It's very easy. Now, if we do the historical wild goose bloodline DNA sort of method, the problem is that we have to be consistent and do it with every single name. We can't just do it with Magog. So for example, Gomer became the Gimeri. They became the Cimmerians. They became the Gauls. They became the Celts. They became the Germans. They became the Irish. Now you'll see a lot of prophecy books that say the coming Russian invasion of Israel. And that sells well because in the United States, in particular, the consumers of prophecy literature are often very against communism or Russia or these former communist bloc states, etc. And picking on Russia plays well. The problem is that you don't also see a book called The Coming Irish Invasion of Israel. But if these prophecy authors were consistent, they would have to do just that. If you trace down the historical bloodline, migration, intermarrying patterns of all of these peoples, you end up with, these are the Japhetic peoples, which is to say they're the children of Japheth. They are the Caucasian children of Noah. You end up with South America. You end up with the American invasion of Israel. You end up with Canada. You end up with Australia and New Zealand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You end up, yes, with Russia. You end up with most of the Western world. Okay, however, if you simply stick to the geographic correlation method, then you have a Turkish-led, Middle Eastern, North African invasion of the land of Israel. Of course, that makes much more sense, and it aligns with that which all of the other biblical prophets say. Now, here's where it gets tricky. And I've done this very carefully. I've worked through numerous books, and I've said, how does this particular author identify the names to arrive at the conclusions that they arrive at? And what many of them do is they switch methods midstream. So with, for example, Magog, they'll use the historical bloodline wild goose chase method to arrive at Russia. But with some of the other names, they hold firm to the geographic correlation method. So it's almost like a card trick, switching methods midstream, and most people reading the books, they just take an author as an authority. They don't really question or analyze their methodology. But when you switch methods midstream, it really is like a magic trick, and you can create virtually any map of different nations, any enemies that you don't like, and you can throw them in there and make them part of the story. But the bottom line is we need to be consistent. We need to use a responsible method of interpretation, which I would argue is the historical geographic correlation method. And most of all, we need to be consistent. We need to choose a method and stick with it. So either we go with the historical wild goose chase method and end up with all of the Western world, including the United States, just as equally as Russia is going to invade Israel, or we use the correlation, the historical geographic correlation method, which says that we'll probably have a leader from the region of Turkey, the heart of the Middle East, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, that general region, who's going to lead an invasion of Middle Eastern, North African nations into the land of Israel. So I hope that's helpful. Look forward to doing the next one. Until then, God bless and Maranatha.
Thank you for watching this session of End Time Talks. Frontier Alliance International, as an organization and spiritual family, we're focused on laying foundations and making disciples where there are none in the Middle East, specifically in the Muslim world. I want to ask you to consider supporting FAI at just $5 a month. $5 a month is going to go into a pool of a global family of people that are giving $5 a month that goes into the hands of laborers serving on the front lines in the most difficult, challenging places in the world today, laying foundations where there are none and making disciples where there are none. Again, thank you guys for watching, and thank you for supporting FAI.